Well, good morning again, and welcome to those of you watching us online and those who are able to be here with us today in our service. We're honored to have you with us. And we are continuing a series that we've been in for the last several weeks, where we have been talking about questions about God and faith, and we've been trying to answer some of the most common questions that Christians ask and try to find answers to those questions. Today I want to tackle the question of, what will I do in heaven? What will I do in heaven? And we're going to look at this morning. I want to begin by sharing a quote from the great minister Dwight L. Moody, and what a powerful speaker he was, not only in Great Britain but also in America. And I want to share something that he said throughout his lifetime. Now, as I read these words, I want you to remember these were spoken and written down in the 1800s, so we don't talk exactly like this now, but you get the gist of the quote that we're going to be sharing this morning. Moody said, quote, "Someday you will read in the papers that D.L. Moody of East Northfield is dead. Don't you believe a word of it. At that moment I shall be more alive than I am now. I shall have gone up higher, that is all, out of this old clay tenement into a house that is immortal, a body that death cannot touch, that sin cannot taint, a body fashioned like unto his glorious body. I was born of the flesh in 1837, and I was born of the Spirit in 1856. That which is born of the flesh may die, that which is born of the Spirit will live forever." Amen. During his evangelistic crusades in the late 1800s, D.L. Moody loved to quote the first two sentences as a way of shocking his audience with the truth that death would not be the end of his life, but only the beginning of his life. Those words came true for Moody on December 22nd, 1899. After decades of nonstop preaching and writing and speaking and evangelizing and traveling, his heart began to fail him. And his son, Will, recorded these words of his father as he was laying in his deathbed, ready to transition from this world into the next world. And here it says that with his family gathered around him, D.L. Moody began to cry out, "Earth recedes, heaven opens before me." His family thought he was dreaming or having hallucinations. They didn't think it was real. And he said to one of his sons, Will, he said, "Will, this is no dream. It is beautiful. It is like a trance. If this is death, it is sweet. There is no valley here. God is calling me. I must go." His son says, "Then it seemed as if the heavens opened before his father's eyes. And his father said, 'This is my triumph. This is my coronation day. I have been looking forward to this for years.' He said, as my father lay on his deathbed, his face lit up. And he said to his wife, 'Irene, I see the children's faces.'" Speaking of his two grandchildren who had died previously that year. A few minutes later, his son records that his father took his last breath and entered into heaven. A man who had taken both America and Great Britain by the hand and brought them both to God and died as he lived, a man full of faith, ready to meet his Lord. One question I'm often asked is, where is heaven? When the Bible indicates a location for heaven, we're always told that heaven is up. We know that Jesus came down from heaven to the earth, and then we know that one day that the New Jerusalem will come down out of heaven, according to Revelation 21 and 2. Some people have suggested that heaven can be located in the present physical universe, and a few have even searched for it beyond the North Star. But all attempts to locate heaven in this manner are useless. Heaven is a real place, but it is only on God's map, not on an astronomer's chart. In fact, children have no trouble believing in heaven. Don't you wish we could have the faith of a child? I want to share some children's thoughts about heaven. I just want you to think about these children as they talk about heaven and what heaven really is to them. Here are some of their ideas, although they may be a little mixed up to some of us. 8-year-old Eric described heaven this way: He said, heaven is a place where there is a lot of money lying around. That would be heaven, wouldn't it? He said, you can just pick it up and play with it and buy things. He said, when I go to heaven, I think I'm going to buy a basketball, and I'm going to play basketball with my great-great-grandmother. That is Eric, an 8-year-old's concept of what heaven is. And you know what? I don't think his concept is wrong. That is his concept of heaven at 8 years old. Scott said, heaven is up in the sky, and you can look down at circuses for free if you want to, except you have to get God to give you permission first. Not a bad concept. 7-year-old David declared that heaven is kind of big, and they sit around playing harps. And then he says, I don't know how to play a harp, but I suppose I should learn how to play that dumb thing pretty soon. Tommy, age 7, spoke for many adults when he talked about heaven. He said, I know what heaven is, but I don't want to go there. I want to go to North Carolina instead. And many of us would say the same things, wouldn't we? We believe that heaven is a real place, and we want to go there someday, but we'd rather go to North Carolina or Florida or Hawaii or the Bahamas first. Heaven can wait as far as many people are concerned. But that attitude, even though it is very common among Christians, reflects a complete reversal of the biblical picture of heaven. The Bible tells us that this earth is passing away. It will be here today and it will be gone tomorrow. And heaven, although it seems like a fairy tale to many of us, is a true reality. We did a Bible study on several Wednesday nights months ago by Dr. David Jeremiah on heaven. If you have not seen that Bible study, I would encourage you to go look it up, YouTube it, wherever you can find it, and watch his series on heaven. I'm not trying to preach Dr. Jeremiah's sermon this morning, but we're going to talk about heaven. And the book of Revelation has more to say about heaven than any other book in the Bible. If you want to know what heaven's going to be like, just begin reading the book of Revelation, and you'll know what heaven is going to be like. Most of us love the beautiful picture that is painted of heaven in Revelation 21 and 22 in those two chapters. But there is another much briefer image of heaven that we find in Revelation chapter 7 that I want to focus on this morning. It is in Revelation chapter 7, verses 9 through 17. And it's only 8 verses long, but in those 8 verses, it is as though the Apostle John, who is writing the book of Revelation, pulls back the curtain for us and gives us a glimpse of what heaven is really going to be like. This is what your eternal home is going to be like. And we want to talk about that for just a little while this morning. What is heaven going to be like? What are we going to do there? What are we going to experience? Here are 3 facts I want to give you today. First, in heaven, I will be part of a large multicultural praise. I will be part of a large multicultural praise. John begins to write about heaven, and he says this: after this, I saw a vast crowd, too great to count, from every nation and tribe and people and language, standing in front of the throne and before the Lamb. They were clothed in white robes and held palm branches in their hands. And they were shouting with a great roar, salvation comes from our God who sits on the throne and from the Lamb. And all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living beings. And they fell down before the throne with their faces to the ground and worshiped God. And they sang, amen, blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and strength belong to our God forever and ever. Amen. This passage gives us a great deal of information about heaven as we begin to dissect it. First, notice the number of the redeemed. There is a large crowd around the throne, John says, that is so huge that it is beyond human calculation. He says this crowd is so large, I can't even give a number to it. I can't count that high. There are so many people around this throne. Second, notice the variety of the redeemed that John talks about. He says there are saints from every nation, every tribe, every people, and every language group. Third, notice the posture of the redeemed. What are they doing around that throne? They are before the throne of God, standing like an army before its commander-in-chief, waiting for God to tell them what they are to do. Fourth, notice the appearance of the redeemed. They wear white robes, which is a symbol of purity. They are holding palm branches in their hands. Next Sunday is Palm Sunday. We will have branches for you next Sunday. Palm branches represent a sign of victory. So they're standing there in white robes, which means purity. They're holding palm branches of victory in their hands, waving them back and forth. And then finally, notice the song of the redeemed. They sing about salvation that comes from God and from the Lamb. What a picture of what heaven is really going to be like. The saints are redeemed and they are rejoicing. And as Tony Campolo says, if you want to get ready for heaven, go to choir practice. You're going to be singing and rejoicing in heaven. Now, you may not can carry a tune in a bucket down here, but you'll be singing and rejoicing in heaven. And there won't be any sound mixing. There'll be no engineering going on. You'll just be singing the song of the redeemed in heaven. There's going to be a lot of praise and worship going on in heaven. And I think as the Apostle John saw this in his vision, this amazing crowd, the immense size of it, what was he thinking and what was going through his mind? And what do we learn from a crowd that is too large to count? Well, certainly this crowd teaches us that God will not be defeated in any way whatsoever. I think we have this mindset that heaven's going to be a wonderful place and a glorious place, and yet heaven's just going to be contained with just a few people in it to enjoy what God has done. But John says, no, that's not the case. There's a crowd so big in heaven that I can't even apply a number to the size of this crowd. There are going to be millions and millions and millions of people in heaven one day standing before the throne of God, dressed in their white robes and waving their palm branches of victory and singing the song of the redeemed that the angels cannot sing one day. That's what heaven is going to be like. And it shows us that God will not be defeated. It is so easy for us to get caught up in this mindset of my for and no more, as if somehow sinners are beyond being saved today. But we must realize, even as we see the cultural decline around us, that the bad guys are not winning, that in the end, God always wins. Now, we can look around and say, well, where is God, and why doesn't God do this, and why doesn't God do that? But listen, God always wins in the end, and God always wins big. And there will be more people in heaven than you ever dreamed possible, because our God is greater than our limited imagination. And can I take it one step further and say this, that there will be some people in heaven that will shock you that they are in heaven, because you don't think they're worthy to be there. And then there will be some people who will be missing in heaven that you thought would be there. Let me just say it this way. Nobody's going to get in that's not supposed to be there. You don't have to judge them. You don't have to condemn them. You don't have to save them. You don't have to purify them. That is God's job to take care of all of that stuff. Whoever deserves to be there is going to be there. And those are the ones that John saw in the crowd that day. This picture of this large multitude also teaches us that in the end, once we are in heaven, every geographic barrier that separates us will be swept away. Every racial prejudice will be gone in heaven. You will not be racist in heaven. And can I say it? I don't care what color you are, what nation you're from. If you are racist, you will not be in heaven. Racial prejudice will be gone in heaven. One person agrees with me. Maybe some more of you get on board with that one day too. It'll be gone. Every bit of strife will be gone in heaven. What a good day that will be when all God's children will meet together around that throne. But we also notice from this passage that we keep our individuality in heaven. John saw the redeemed gathered into nations and tribes and language groups and clans. And just as Jesus retained the marks of his earthly suffering after his resurrection, you could see the scars in his hands and his side and his feet. You could have seen where the crown of thorns had been placed upon his head. Just as he retained those scars of his suffering, even so we who go to heaven will retain our personal and our group identities. The saints are all redeemed, but they are not all the same. And I don't know why I'm jumping all over the rabbit trails today, but let's just jump on another rabbit trail. Listen, every Christian is not the same. We are all unique. We are all different. We have different experiences. We have different life paths. We can't just put a cookie cutter on every child of God and say you have to be like this and dress like me and talk like me and look like me. We are not that way. And in heaven, we will have our individuality. We're all redeemed, but we're not all the same. Some would ask, well, what language will we speak in heaven? I believe the answer is all of them. In heaven, I believe we'll hear English and Spanish and Portuguese. I believe we'll hear French and Italian and Russian and Swahili. I believe we'll hear Finnish and Yiddish and Hindi and Hebrew and Arabic. I believe you'll hear Turkish and Korean and Japanese and Chinese, just to name it a few of the languages. I believe you'll hear all of those languages in heaven. And although I cannot prove this point, I believe each person will speak whatever language or languages they knew on the earth, and the rest of us will understand everything they say. Well, I don't believe that, Pastor Atkins. Well, tough. I don't care if you believe it or not. This is what I believe. I spoke to a lady this week. She's married to a Hispanic man. And I said, oh, do you speak Spanish? She said, I don't speak a word of Spanish. She said, but I've been married to him for 14 years. And I can understand everything he says in Spanish, but I can't speak it, but I can understand it. And I kind of think that's how heaven's going to be like. Maybe I don't speak Chinese, but that's okay. I believe in heaven I'll have spiritual ears so I can understand every language that is spoken in heaven. And so I may hear someone speaking in Arabic, and although I don't know any Arabic whatsoever, I can understand them even though I don't speak Arabic right now. I believe in heaven it will be like it was on the day of Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, and we will understand every language that is spoken. That's my opinion about that. And if you think about it, this scene that John saw around the throne answers the question, will we know our loved ones in heaven? I believe the answer is yes, we'll know our loved ones in heaven. If in heaven I am still joined, according to John, to my nation, to my tribe, to my own people, if in heaven I can speak my own language, how can it be that I would be a stranger to those that I loved on this earth? Such a thought would be impossible for me to even conceive from a loving Father. Those relationships that we have on earth that are sanctified by the saving grace of God will continue throughout all of eternity, but they will become deeper and more precious as the ages roll on and on. Consider an elderly couple that have walked together for 55 years, facing all of the joys and trials of life hand in hand. Will they say farewell to this life only to become strangers in the next? And I know the Bible says there'll be no giving and receiving in marriage in heaven. We won't be getting married in heaven. But I believe we will know our loved ones who are there. In fact, I believe it's impossible to conceive that you won't know your mother or your father or your brother or your sister or your spouse or your child that has already gone on before you and gone to heaven. It is inconceivable that we would not know the ones that we loved on this earth and love them even deeper in the next world that we get to enjoy with them. That love that we will experience in heaven will be in a more pure form because it is not mixed with base desires and earthly weaknesses. And so John begins to paint this beautiful picture of what heaven is going to be like. And he says, I will be part of a large multicultural praise. Next, we see from John's picture that I will be on the other side of suffering forever in heaven. I'll be on the other side of suffering forever. John writes, then one of the 24 elders asked me, who are those who are clothed in white? Where do they come from? And I said to him, sir, you are the one who knows. Kind of a rhetorical question. Who are these? Sir, you know who they are. And then he answers his question. Then he said to me, these are the ones who died in the great tribulation. They have washed their robes in the blood of the Lamb and made them white. That phrase, the great tribulation, just think about that just for a moment. When we read the book of Revelation, we often think about the terrible plagues and the terrible events that are going to precede the coming of Jesus Christ to the earth. And if you read about the seals being opened and the trumpets being blown and the bowls being poured out on the earth. And we think of all this apocalyptic type imagery when we think about the Great Tribulation. But in a larger sense, those words, the Great Tribulation, applies to all believers. Every person in heaven will have a story. In fact, every person here this morning and everybody watching online, you have a story. You have a story about your life and what you have experienced. And in heaven, there will be one person who was persecuted. There'll be one who was sick. There'll be one who was forgotten, or one who was abandoned, one who was mistreated. There'll be that person in heaven who had lost a child. There'll be somebody there who had lived through a divorce. There'll be somebody else there who had suffered physically for many years. You see, every saint of God comes out of some type of great tribulation in their lifetime. But we all go to heaven the same way, and that is through the cross of Jesus Christ. We've all got a story. We've all had some suffering. We've all had some pain. We've all had some bad things happen to us, but we all go to heaven the same way. And that is through the cross of Jesus Christ. And once we're there, that dark cloud of suffering that was over us on earth, it is now replaced by the bright light of heaven. That road that was steep, that journey that was hard, those waters of death that were cold and deep, but all of that goes away because God brings us safely to the other side. So who are these people that make up the great multitude that John saw? He doesn't say anything like this. Not the rich, not the poor, not the black, not the white, not the Asian, not the Hispanic, not men or women, not young or old. John gives us no descriptions whatsoever like that. And we get caught up in that when we begin to tell a story about it was a man and it was a white man and he was a rich white man. Or throw any adjectives you want to in there. And we try to describe it that way. But John leaves all of that out of this description. We don't know their colors. We don't know whether they were rich or poor, educated or uneducated. We don't know if they were men or women. And while there are these clear distinctions in heaven, John sees only one group that makes up this vast multitude. He says, these are those who have been washed by the blood of the Lamb. That is the only qualification for entrance into the city of God. Not that you're a man, not that you're a woman, not that you're white or black, Hispanic or Asian. Nothing else matters other than I have been washed by the blood of the Lamb. And that grants me entrance into the city of God. Nothing else matters. It would be so great if we could see people the way God saw people. It'd be so great if we could just drop the titles, drop the positions, drop the gender, and just say, no, we're just the people of God. We've just been washed by the blood of the Lamb. And those are the redeemed of Jesus Christ. And that's going to happen 2 more times this morning. The rapture's not happening right now, I don't think. And if it has, we got enough to still have church in here this morning. But think about this picture just for a moment. You begin with soiled garments that are stained and that have been ruined by sin. You take those soiled, ruined garments and you plunge them into the blood of Jesus Christ. And when they come out of the blood of Christ, they're not red, but they are pure white. That doesn't make any sense, does it? But when I plunge it into the blood of Christ, it comes out pure and clean and spotless. And so in heaven, I'm going to be part of this large multicultural praise that's going to go on around the throne. And then I'll be on the other side of suffering forever in heaven. And thirdly, I will experience the life I could never find on this earth. Something I have never experienced on this earth. John says this is why they stand in front of God's throne and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will give them shelter. And they will never again be hungry or thirsty. They will never be scorched by the heat of the sun. For the Lamb on the throne will be their shepherd. He will lead them to springs of life-giving water. And God will wipe every tear from their eyes. Here's a final picture of heaven that John paints for us in this passage. The believers are shown gathered in a place of honor before the throne of God. There, John says, they serve him day and night. It is a continual service. Because in heaven, you never grow tired and you never grow weary. And so day and night, they're serving God around the throne. Day and night, day and night, day and night, and on and on and on and on it goes. And the longer we serve him, the stronger we become. Scripture says we will mount up with wings as eagles. We run and we're not weary. We walk and we do not faint. And yet in this current life, we must rest sooner or later. Age and sickness comes to all of us eventually. And what we would do, we cannot do as we get older and weaker. And even the strongest eventually have to succumb and take a break. A few weeks ago, my oldest brother came into town and helped me with some work around the house. I have three brothers. They're all my big brothers, but he's my biggest brother, my oldest brother. And when I was a little kid, I used to look up to him. Now I tower over him as an adult. But in my mind, I kept going back to when I was a child and how big he seemed and how strong he seemed and how he could do anything and he would always defend me. And yet, now at the age of almost 60, I see that age has caught up with him and he can't do all the things that he used to be able to do. And as we worked, we would take breaks, and I thought a few years ago, he never took a break. He just kept on working through it. And me, as I get ready to turn 51, I see in myself, and I think, I can't do what I would always like to do. It takes me a little bit longer now. I'm a little more cautious now because age and time and sickness catches up to all of us, but not in heaven. They serve God day and night, day and night. And they never get tired, and they never get weary, and they never run out of strength, and they never have to take a rest. Because in heaven, we go from strength to strength and joy to joy. We will serve God in his temple, which means that we will be in his immediate presence. There will be no second-class saints in heaven on that day. And over us, the Bible says, he will spread his tent of protection. And it says we will never hunger, and we will never thirst. And we would say it this way: we will never get sunburned again once we are in heaven. Thank God for all the milky white people like me. No more sunblock in heaven. Many of us can't even relate to that concept of never hunger and never thirst again. John was writing to a persecuted church and persecuted believers who had to leave everything behind. Many times they had to just run for their life at a moment's notice. And they were in deserts, and they were in caves, and they were in mountains, and they were tired, and they were hungry, and they were thirsty, and they would be in the elements, and the sun would scorch their skin. And this is a picture of hope that John is painting for them, that in heaven you'll never be hungry again, that in heaven you'll never be thirsty again, that in heaven the sun will never burn you again. God is going to spread his tent of protection over you, and he's always going to be watching out for you in heaven. It's going to be a great place. The final word is this. John says, no tears in heaven. I don't know about you, but I simply cannot imagine a world without tears. Today we live in a society that has heartbreak and sadness on every side. But John says there comes a day when all suffering will be gone forever. Someone has asked the question, will God wipe away our tears personally from our eyes? I think the answer is yes. That the God who loves us will personally wipe the tears from our eyes. The Bible in basic English offers this translation. And God will make glad their eyes forever. God's going to make your eyes glad forever and ever and ever. In heaven, all tears will be gone. As I think about heaven, many things are mystery, but some things are clearly revealed as I read the Bible. Here are 3 things that will not happen in heaven. First, I will not grow weary. Second, I will not suffer want. And thirdly, I will not weep. I will not do any of those things in heaven. They will be absent from that place. I'm not going to grow weary. I'm not going to suffer any want. I'm not going to weep in heaven. And as I read the book of Revelation, I'm struck by how many of the truths about heaven are stated in the negative. In other words, heaven is going to be the absence of so many things that trouble us on this earth. Think about what won't be there. There will be no tears in heaven. There will be no death in heaven. There'll be no sorrow in heaven. There'll be no pain in heaven. There'll be no night in heaven. There'll be no defilement in heaven. There'll be no curse in heaven. And for many of you would say the very best part, there'll be no goodbyes in heaven. And for me, this says it all. No more ever saying goodbye to a loved one as their body is lowered into the grave. No more seeing your children grow up and move across country to some distant place. No more saying farewell to a dear friend. No more broken relationships or broken marriages. No more misunderstandings that grow into bitter disputes. All of that will be missing in heaven. And it'll all be left far behind. And C.S. Lewis liked to say that Christians never say goodbye. We simply say, see you later. We'll see you later. But one question remains. Will you be there? And are you sure you're going to be there? Many years ago, Pastor Charles Fuller announced that he would be speaking the following Sunday on his radio program on heaven. And during that week, he received a letter from an elderly gentleman who was ill and at the point of death. And I want to share a portion of this letter. This is not on the screen, so I just want you to listen to me read this portion of this letter this morning that he received. So, Dr. Fuller, next Sunday you are to talk about heaven. I'm interested in that land because I have held a clear title to a bit of property there for over 55 years. I did not buy it. It was given to me without money and without price. But the donor purchased it for me at a tremendous sacrifice. I'm not holding it for speculation since the title is not transferable and it is not a vacant lot. The man continues, for more than half a century I have been sending material out of which the greatest architect and builder of the universe has been building a home for me, which will never need to be repaired because it will suit me perfectly and will never grow old. Termites can never undermine its foundation, for it rests on the rock of ages. Fire cannot destroy it. Floods cannot wash it away. No locks or bolts will be placed upon its doors, so no vicious person can enter that land where my dwelling stands. He says, now almost completed and ready for me to enter and abide in peace eternally without fear of ever being ejected. He says, there is a valley of deep shadow between the place where I live in California and to that which I shall journey in a very short time. I cannot reach my home in the city of God without passing through this dark valley of shadows. But I'm not afraid, because the best friend that I ever had went through that same valley a long, long time ago and drove away all gloom. He has stuck by me through thick and thin since we first became acquainted 55 years ago. And I hold his promise in printed form never to forsake nor to leave me alone. He will be with me as I walk through the valley of the shadows, and I shall not lose my way when he is with me. The elderly gentleman who is sick and dying says, I hope to hear your sermon on heaven next Sunday from my home, but I have no assurance that I should be able to do so. My ticket to heaven has no date marked for the journey, no return coupon, and no permit for baggage. Yes, I'm ready to go and may not be here while you're talking next Sunday, but I shall meet you there someday. Heaven is a real place. It is a wonderful place. And it is a place where the saints will dwell forever. As I thought about the sermon today, an old gospel song came to mind that simply declares, when the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. Now, I know most of us don't use that word yonder anymore. That's just the word we don't use a whole lot. And maybe we do. The song says these words, when the trumpet of the Lord shall sound, and time shall be no more, and the morning breaks eternal, bright and fair, when the saved of earth shall gather over on the other shore, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. On that bright and cloudless morning, when the dead in Christ shall rise, and the glory of his resurrection share, when his chosen ones shall gather to their home beyond the skies, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. Let us labor for the Master from the dawn till setting sun. Let us talk of all his wondrous love and care. Then when all of life is over and our work on earth is done, and the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. How about it this morning? You going to be there when the roll is called up yonder? You're going to be in that great crowd that was around the throne of God that John saw? Doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man or black or white or rich or poor, educated or uneducated, you're going to be around that throne of God. You're going to have that white robe of purity on. You're going to be waving that palm branch of victory before him that day. Are you going to have God himself come down and wipe every tear from your eye one day? When the roll is called up yonder, I'll be there. I'm going to ask you to do something with this one. I'm going to ask you to stand. I couldn't tell you the last time I sang this song in church. I'm just being brutally honest. But we're about ready to sing it this morning. If you don't know it, it's just as easy as I said it was. And as you sing this song, I just want you to think about heaven. If you got a loved one over there, I want you to think about it. I thought this week, yeah, my dad's going to know me there. My mom's going to know me there. My grandparents are going to know me there. I've got some good friends that have already made it on over there. They're going to know me and I'm going to know them. But they've already made it. I'm still trying to get there. But when that roll is called, I want to be there. How about you? And you just sing it out. If you can't sing in tune, sing it anyway, because you'll be able to sing in tune in heaven one day. But you just sing it and you think about what a great place heaven is going to be.